coaster because overall Michigan's been a pretty consistent team overall when it comes to performance. Like they've played well. I think even in the Michigan State game, you can look at, long stretches of football where they did play well. I mean, at one point they had a 30-14 lead in that game. Obviously Michigan State came back after that, but Michigan's been a pretty consistent team. They've come out with good energy. They've come out with good focus. You can't really look at any games where they were undisciplined and had a lot of penalties. Like they've been a really well coached team. I think with every team outside, well, really every team has flaws. Even the juggernaut that is Georgia football right now with, I would argue that their passing game is with Stetson Bennett isn't one that's probably going to win you a national championship. But when you're holding teams to like an average of 2 points a game, it doesn't take much offense to win those games. So, and Michigan has their flaws as well, with a just consistent, pass game. Obviously the Michigan State game, it over 300 yards, passing close to 400, and some really big plays, some explosive plays in the pass game. I'm sure that Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan faithful would like to have some pretty explosive plays this Saturday too with Penn State.
It's funny how the college football season unfolds and what the interpretation of each game is versus you don't see this in the NFL. It's pretty much a given. Okay, the competition's the same. Everything's good. There might be a conversation every so often that, oh, they got an easy stretch here. They've got a brutal stretch, but pretty much just shakes out at the end that everybody's got roughly the same schedule. But with college football, we're still in that kind of chasing your tail, trying to figure out, okay, well, they beat them. Man, we thought they were good. How good are they really? Who did they beat? And we take it like 3-4 degrees out. And that comes to mind considering what Cade McNamara did a couple of weeks ago against Michigan State. Even though that was a loss, we all saw what Cade did against what we thought was a good defense. And I still think it's a good defense, and certainly not a great defense, but a good defense that he was pinpoint on, anticipating throws, making difficult throws, doing all the things we talked about. But then we see Michigan State turn around and Aiden O'Connell of Purdue torches them for 536 yards. Now, 536 spot, that comes in different ways. There's a 536 that sometimes you see out of desperation that includes 4 picks and you're down 3 scores the entire second half. That wasn't the 536. That was an efficient 40 for 54. No picks, no turnovers. You're putting up 54 times. You're not turning the ball over at all. Put up 536 and 40 points on Michigan State. That's pretty impressive.
And just big play after big play. I just watching that game, and David Bell, that receiver is just unreal. That's a guy who he just a different level. But yeah, the offense for Purdue, it just explosive, putting up points. I mean, 40 points. I'm not sure anyone would have called that from Purdue on Michigan State. I know some people were calling pretty early on too an upset of Michigan State, losing to Purdue, but I don't think anyone thought it would look the way that it did. But it's so interesting when you look at Purdue of how it is they can beat these top 2-3 ranked teams, but just when it comes to week in and week out, they just cannot seem to kind of get it together and have that consistency. They're just they seem to be a program that is just set on upsetting and ruining people's seasons. It's interesting, but I mean, if you look at that performance they had against Michigan State, if Purdue played that way the entire season, I mean, you're probably looking at maybe a 1-loss team, but but they don't play like that all the time. And I think kind of back to your point of NFL, you don't see it, a lot of just the kind of roller coaster. I think a lot of that is you have guys who have been there before, like, Lamar Jackson is in his 4th or going on 5th year. So kind of what you can expect from him consistency wise, and just different things like that. But it's it it's interesting. But Purdue is they win over Michigan State. That throws a huge wrench into the Big Ten East Division, and all the teams are sitting at one loss. Ohio State does not have any losses in the division or in the conference, but they still have to play Michigan State. They still have to play Michigan. So it's interesting. And then the college football rankings just came out, and I know Marky had a call-in show last night. To go over the rankings, and I'm sure Michigan fans are pretty elated. And from what I've seen on Twitter, happy to tease, Michigan State that they are now ranked higher than Michigan State is. And, after just a couple of weeks of losing to them not too long ago. But I mean, to me, I get both sides of it. Like, I get the premise of, well, Michigan State beat Michigan, but also, I mean, we can, whether it's right or wrong, I mean, we've seen it before from the committee on when you lose does matter as well. So, Michigan had their loss 2 weeks ago, and, and Michigan State had theirs just this past Saturday. So we talked about it before we kind of kicked things off today. It's kind of backstage of just, the formula for everybody except Georgia is to win out. Like, if you want to get to in the college football playoff, it's very simple: win out. And I'd say except for Georgia, because I think they can still take a loss and still be able to get into the college football playoff because they've looked so dominant. So it's interesting. Michigan is number 6, I believe, in the college football rankings, and that means they're pretty darn close to getting in. So we'll Saturday will be huge.